Our speaker this morning is Paige Barnhart. Paige is a four-year boarding student from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. She's the captain of the rowing team and the proud roommate of Sydney Saracine. Paige?
For most people at Hill, sports and the arts are a central theme of our lives. My central theme was swimming. During the first 8 years that I swam, I developed a deep love of the sport. When choosing Hill to continue my high school career, I had no belief this would change. However, as I entered my fifth form year, I realized I had burnt out. Everyone has their thing that they are good at and known for. My thing was swimming. I have always felt a sense of comfort from being in the pool. From a young age, I was always in the water and never wanted to leave. My parents could tell you that they had to practically pull me out of the pool at closing time to head home. After an endless summer of staying in the pool from open to close, my parents sent my sister, Mary Kate, and I up for our local swim team. On our first day of practice, we discovered that our neighbors were also on the team, and we all had fun practicing together. This initial practice, alongside my closest friends, was the origin of my spark, the spark that I thought would never burn out. I loved everything about this spark. The adrenaline rush as I stood impatiently on the starting blocks, the anticipation of the beep signaling the start of my race, the way it felt to beat someone to the wall, the way it felt to dive into the water on a hot summer day. But the thing I loved the most was the bond that I shared with my dad over our mutual love of swimming. He was the one who encouraged me to start swimming for a club team after I aged out of my local team. Later on, he encouraged me to swim almost year-round, leaving me just enough time to play lacrosse in the spring. Most of my summers were spent with my dad and I, swimming side by side in the pool, racing to see who could get to the wall the fastest. Although he always put up a good fight, he would usually let me win in the end. These races against my dad made me love swimming even more. Swim was always a constant in my life. It was my safe space. I was able to just let my thoughts and worries disappear for a few hours of the day before I had to go back to worrying about school and other daunting aspects of my life. My club practices happened when I was traveling back from school, so I'd swim most practices alone. My dad decided to swim with me every Wednesday night since he only had a half a day of work. We followed my practice plan, but somehow, without fail, we always managed to squeeze in a race against each other before we had to leave. Unknowingly, these Wednesday practices had turned into my best memories with my dad and added even more fuel to my love for the sport. At the end of my 8th grade year, I decided to come to Hill. I was so excited to swim for a new team that was actually a part of my school and not just a club team. In my 3rd form year, my dad made it to every single swim meet, no matter how far away it was, or if he had to take off of work just to watch me race for a few minutes. Knowing that my dad was there to cheer me on, even when I didn't do my best, helped my spark grow even more. Although this year felt different than all my other years of swimming, I still loved the sport, but something was off. My passion was still there and fueled, but I felt it beginning to fade away. I decided to ignore this feeling and kept doing the sport that I loved. This was the first time in 4 years I wasn't swimming year-round. I decided to row in the spring with some of my friends and found that I was counting down the minutes until practice started, something unlike I was doing with swimming. That summer, I continued to swim for my club team, even though the practices started at 6 a.m. every day. I did not feel like my spark was wavering anymore and solidified the decision that it was just the nerves of racing on a high school team for the first time. After those practices, and when my dad had arrived home from work, we would go out to the pool in our backyard and swim even more. Some days, we would just mess around playing Marco Polo or throw the ball for our dog, Tucker. But most of the time, we would swim laps together, him critiquing my form and me doing my best to fix it. My 4th form season eventually rolled around, and I realized that this feeling of something being off was back. My passion for the sport I loved so much was fading away, and I tried to push that feeling away by saying it was the winter season. As the season progressed, I realized that I was beginning to become nervous before my races, which was something that had never happened to me before. I still had the adrenaline rush, waiting for the sound signaling the start of my race, but I felt a new, subtle pressure to perform better than I had at the previous meet. Despite this unease, I continued with the season again while trying to shake the feeling that my passion for swimming was fading away. That summer was the first summer I hadn't swum for a club team since I was 7 years old. At the first home meet of my fifth form year, I was standing on the starting blocks, waiting for the signal to start my 100 freestyle. This meet, something in me changed. There was no anticipation of the beep, and when I dove into the water, unbeknownst to me, my spark fully went out, and for good this time. With no spark, there was nothing that drove me to compete. There was no longer the rush I felt to be the first person to touch the wall. There was no fuel for me to try my hardest, and there was especially no love for the sport anymore. Once I hit the wall to end my race, I realized that the joy I had once felt had fully disappeared out of my grasp. I swam one of my worst times since coming to Hill, and I could not even imagine facing my dad, the person I shared a love for swimming with. As soon as I hopped out of the water, it fully hit me. I had officially burnt out. What was left of my flame was just an empty void with nothing left to burn. This wasn't a thing that had just appeared out of the blue. It was a gradual feeling that I had been denying over the past few years. I could not suppress this overwhelming feeling any longer. As I let this feeling consume me, I realized that I had slowly begun dreading going to practice. I would try to show up as late as I possibly could without making my coaches too mad, and I was taking long breaks, trying to stall from having to swim the next set. Even though I had admitted this to myself, I couldn't admit it to anyone else, especially not my dad. I refused to walk over to him and acknowledge what had just happened. Even though I knew he would just tell me that he was proud of me for trying my best, I couldn't face him. Our mutual love of swimming was now only one-sided. It felt like a huge part of my life was stripped away from me from right under my feet. I didn't know how to react, so I just walked back to the team and sat down on the bench to wait for my next event. While I was there, a wave of guilt rushed over me. I felt guilty that I had disappointed my teammates, my coaches, my younger self, and most importantly, my dad. I spent 11 years of my life enjoying swimming, all for it to be completely stripped away in one meet. There is now a void where my passion for the sport once was. This void made me quickly realize that swimming would not be my thing for much longer. This was the first moment I had ever seriously considered quitting. I wanted the feeling of disappointing my dad to stop, but I thought that quitting would only make him even more disappointed with me. I now know that he is proud of me no matter what I do or what happens, but at the time, I was scared he would be disappointed. This was the only thought that kept me going through the rest of my fifth form season. Once the season was over, I was so excited to restart the sport that I now have realized has relit my spark: rowing. Unlike swim, I have never dreaded going to a single practice and was excited for every one. Now this year, I signed up for swim. The first practice back, I was burnt out to a point that I did not think was possible. I could barely look at the pool, let alone dive into it. I did eventually get in after contemplating if I even wanted to go through with the season. As I was swimming, I realized my arm was going numb. But this was not unusual since I had shoulder problems in the past. I went to the trainers the next day, and they told me I had nerve compression in my shoulder. They had also said that I most likely would not be able to swim for a while since this was a serious injury if not dealt with properly. This was the second time I seriously contemplated quitting. I finally told my mom about how I had burnt out and had lost my spark. We talked over the options that I had and came to an agreement that I would be best off stopping swimming. This decision couldn't be solidified until I faced my fear and talked to my dad. I called him that night and we talked it over for a while. Unlike what I thought would happen, he was not disappointed in me for burning out. He told me that although he was sad I lost my love for swimming, he was proud of me for finally admitting it and doing what was best for me. Before the start of practice that following day, I talked to the coaches and officially quit. All of the coaches supported my decision and wished me luck in my rowing season. It took me losing my spark and feeling like I lost part of my identity for me to realize that my spark was actually relit by rowing. By being afraid that I would disappoint my dad, I pushed myself to the point where I was injured and burnt out. This doesn't always need to be the case. You do not need to lose yourself to be able to try something new. I have now stopped feeling guilty about losing my spark because, in the end, I did what was best for me. One of the hardest lessons I have learned over these past few years is that it is okay to take a step back if you start losing yourself in a sport that you once loved. Luckily for us, at Hill, we have an environment where you can choose different paths, even if you change it in your sixth form year. Sports and the arts, like many things at our age, are supposed to allow us to feel a sense of completeness. We often put a lot of pressure on ourselves to continue to feel the sense of joy and completeness even after we've lost the passion. It is okay to allow yourself to take a break. It is okay to allow yourself to take a step back. And most importantly, it is okay to choose yourself. Thank you.